Our destination is the stars.
Hi, I'm Shane Thomas. Today we're reading Monster in the Lift Tube, a love story, which is one of my own from the Lark Transmissions, part of the Anki Legacies series. Larry knew she would take the lift tube. He'd been an engineer on the Starship a long, long time. And if he knew one thing for certain, people on the Lark 3 Colonial Starship kept to their schedules. Larry knew they weren't a match on paper. Though he looked every bit as young as the day he left college back on Earth all those centuries ago, thanks to genetic treatments with Antarctic krill DNA, he knew she just entered maturity, not even to mention her enhancements. He reasoned that she took part in the next colonization effort, and her DNA laced with whatever the geneticists on board determined would allow humanity to thrive under unearthly conditions. All differences aside, they would one day reach the planet, and she would leave him to start a life and a family on a world, while Larry continued his work here aboard the Starship. But none of that seemed to matter. Layla took the long way to her geological study group, as she had since the engineer caught her eye nearly a month ago. Something about the man that pulled her to him, like he exerted gravity beyond what the colony's artificial environment provided. Layla felt a pull toward him that lured her to the only place a fledgling colonist like her ever spotted the engineering team. Some friends in medical training told her that engineers stay with the ship, that the same crew had manned the vessel since departing Earth nearly 530 years ago. Some of them looked old, but most, like her engineer, looked to only be a couple years older than herself, 19. One could hardly blame a person aboard the ship for having genetic modifications that most would consider unnatural. Layla didn't mind someone's quirks. After all, her genetic modifications could be so prominent that at times even her peers looked nervous around her. Her heart fluttered as she rounded the corner and saw him, waiting for the lift tube, as reliable as her morning alarm. "It's nice to see you." Larry gave her a smile he had practiced in the little mirror attached to the door of his crew locker. "I'm Layla. I don't think we formally met." She extended a hand. Larry grasped her soft hand in his own rough grip, careful not to squeeze too hard, and careful not to give her the limp fish of a handshake. He had done it. After weeks of building courage and allowing mild interest to grow to, well, something more, he had begun speaking to this beautiful, mysterious girl. What was the genetic adaptation for her generation? Larry had such a hard time keeping up with the genetics department. He motioned for Layla to enter the lift before him, then quickly followed, now nervous that someone else might join them in the small space. It had happened before. As Larry racked his brain for a casual topic, the lift shuddered and ground to a halt. Strange, he mused. This lift is not due for maintenance for another 12 years. The lights dimmed and the intercom announced a malfunction, asserting that a crew had been dispatched. "I didn't plan it, I swear." Larry's grin turned rather sheepish. "Well, I don't mind the company," Layla replied. "Sometimes being trapped in tight places makes me nervous." "Let me see if I can override the panel." The engineer leaned past the young woman. He could smell her hair. Was that scent vanilla? "Or we could talk." Layla placed a hand on his, and he froze. I'm sorry, She began to withdraw. Larry straightened and then stammered a bit when she withdrew, then recovered composure. "That would be nice. To be honest, this lift is a bit out of my way. I saw you on it once when I was on special assignment and kept using it so I would run into you again." Larry could feel his cheeks redden. Had he said too much? Layla leaned toward him. "Me too." She stood quite close now and looked up into his eyes. Larry mustered courage. The elevator braking, the conversation going well. He took a chance. Larry leaned in and kissed Layla. She seemed startled at first. Then she kissed him back. Layla couldn't believe her senses. She had kissed boys before, but had never been as electrifying as all this. She felt something magical between them, something... Dread welled up within her. It was happening again. Layla froze, horrified by the realization that her suction cups began activating. She could hear Larry's startled expression from under her pressed lips. Then instinct took over, and the next several minutes passed in a blur. The lift tube door slid open, jarring Layla back to reality, allowing her human side to regain control. She pushed Larry back a bit with a wet popping sound. He looked dazed. Larry opened his mouth to speak, but Layla, overwhelmed with embarrassment, ran from the lift. Layla sulked through the rest of her day. Then she slept fitfully. The next morning, Layla mustered her courage. She would return to the lift and apologize for what happened. Larry would no longer be interested in a freak like her, but at least she could make amends. Nearing the corridor, Leia paused before the last turn, suddenly unwilling to face her crush again, after she had revealed her true self. Long minutes passed. She figured that if Larry had bothered to take the same route, he would have moved on by now. She rounded the corner and gasped. Larry stood by the lift, holding a bouquet of flowers. He grinned when he saw her.